issue of PLUS Bhd. As you are well aware, after the declassification of the highway agreements, so the MCA youth, we made it a point to go over and study all the 22 agreements. We did, and then we deliberated. We had a discussion internally in the party. So we met up with the president in person, and we had a discussion also. We brought this up in a CC meeting, which was held on the 25th of March last week. And the CC has endorsed the proposal, and we are of the view that in the best interest of the people, it is viable for the government to acquire the 26% shares pertaining to PLUS Bhd in the market. And there are several issues which we thought which are of public importance out of the reading of 22 agreements by MCA so far. There are 4 points which have been elaborated in the summary form in the press paper we delivered this morning. The first point was the use of a direct negotiation. We thought it was actually since 1988 to 1990s, the projects, the infrastructure projects involving highways is actually no longer the kind of a project which we thought is of a special skill requirement. Unlike you are buying a set of costumes for the astronauts and so on, it's nothing of that sort. Because we thought infrastructure project like highway is no longer something like that requires special skill anymore. So, but unfortunately, we discovered that most of the agreements executed since 1988 and eventually into 1990s, most of the agreements were executed by way of a direct negotiation instead of a competitive tender. So from the experience from other countries, direct negotiation without a good reason always smacks of abuse of power and corrupt practice, and also this malpractices. So we thought it is not a good move to go by way of direct negotiation. Instead, it should be by way of a public tender. Now, the second point we discover from these 22 agreements, and that would be the interest-free loan given by the government to a private company. And we don't think that is viable, and we don't think that is reasonable, because not to mention an interest-free loan, but also we discovered there is no clause somewhere in the agreement that necessitates any kind of security or rather collateral to be given by this company to the government to secure the repayment of the loan. So it is actually in contravention of the privatization concept, which we understand. Now, the third issue arising from these 22 agreements is the compensation payable by the government. Because under the agreement, there is always a clause that says this private company, concession company, is allowed to have a toll hike once every a certain number of time, a number of years. For example, in the PLUS agreement, which was executed in 1988, so there was a clause that says that once every 3 years, this company is allowed to have a toll hike. So failing which, the government would have to compensate this company. And again, we thought that is actually not in line with the concept of privatization. Because the concept of privatization is the kind of concept where you build, you operate, and you transfer after the expiration of the concession period. And all the risk actually vested with the private company and not with the government. But unfortunately, what we see from these 22 agreements looks like the risk is actually vested with the government instead of the other way around. It should be the private company bearing the risk. The last point which we discovered, which we think it is of public importance, and that is on the issue of verification of traffic volume. Why we raised the issue of TV traffic volume? Because the word of traffic volume appears in all the calculation for the compensation in the formula paid by the government. So at the time when the execution of the agreement looks like this traffic volume was inserted into the agreement. So we want to see how and why this figure of traffic volume was inserted. Was the figure proposed by the company during the time of negotiation, was it verified at all by the government? And through what principles and by what mode that they have come to the conclusion that the traffic volume was a particular figure as stated in the agreement. And this is very important because the traffic volume element will directly affect the amount of compensation paid by the government. And out of these 4 points, and we came to the assessment on the economic perspective of PLUS Highway. Now, we want to emphasize that we now focus on PLUS Bhd, mainly based on 3 reasons. First, because it is the longest in the country, about 800 over kilometers. And the second, because it is affecting the most users in the country every day. And third, because of the peculiar features of PLUS Bhd. Why we say peculiar feature of PLUS Bhd is because if you look at the financial statement of PLUS Bhd, and it is not difficult to find out that at the moment, our federal government is already having 74% share equity, shareholding in this company, through Khazanah having 64% and EPF having the remaining 10%, with the remaining 26% shares floating in the market. So we reckon, if you look at the financial report of PLUS Bhd, in the event the government were to acquire the remaining 26% shares from the market, and it wouldn't be a burden to the government because at the moment, we look at the financial statement of PLUS Bhd, it is already a profit-making company, and it is generating about 600 million ringgit every year. And that we have not taken into account the compensation paid by the government. So it is actually already a profit-making company. Since 2002, especially with the sharp increase of the traffic volume in the country. So we thought by the government acquiring the 26% shares of PLUS Bhd from the market, and it will make 100% owned by the government. So by the time we trust that this company is going to be more socially responsible, instead of insisting on the contractual right of having the toll hike increased once every 3 years. And in the long run, we thought it is also in the best interest of the people for the government to acquire the 26% shares. First, as we say, it is already a profit-making company. It won't cause any burden to the government. And second, you look at the financial statement again, it says here, with the long-term borrowing of the company coming to 9.4 billion, but with the 2008 announcement of dividend amounting to 700 million. So we reckon that if the government were to acquire fully the remaining 26% shares of PLUS Bhd, then ultimately it is just a matter of time, and it is within 13 years, we can repay all the long-term borrowings of this company if we use fully the 700 million dividend declared in order to go for the repayment of the long-term loan for this company. So by then, we are not saying that it is going to be free, but what we are trying to say is this company is going to be more socially responsible instead of thinking of having profitability in mind. So we had series of discussion. From the first day we read the agreement, that was in January this year, and then we started off series of brainstorming and small meeting sessions since February. And then we had discussion with the President personally, and we brought this up to the CC meeting. So we have decided that MCA is of the view that we support the proposal to acquire the 26% shares in the market pertaining to PLUS Bhd. Okay. Paid by the government so far to PLUS Bhd since 2003. So it came to 295 million, and then it increased a bit to 307 million in 2004, and 171 million in 2005, and a whopping 654 million in 2006, and equally big 680 million in 2007, and 730 million in 2008. So if we were to add this up, so it came to about 2.837 billion since 2003 until 2008. Now, as to the price of acquisition, at the moment the price is fetching about 290 in the market, and we look at the history of the performance of the share of this company since 2002, and it shows 340. That was back in 2005 in June. So we reckon if we were to use the price of between $3.50 to $4 to acquire, and assuming that we pay maximum $4 per share to acquire the price of $2.90 at the moment, so the most we are paying is 5.2 billion ringgit. So if we want to compare the kind of compensation we paid, so 5.2 million at one go, we purchased the 26% shares from the market, and in the long run, it is still much cheaper in terms of if we keep on paying under the agreement, the compensation made by the government. So all in all, what we are going to do now, we will really bring this up during the management meeting of the Barisan Nasional. We'll try to persuade the component parties onto the viability of this, because we thought it is legally possible and economically sound to acquire the shares, the 26% shares. And we are going to have a dialogue, which will be led by Dato Sri Leong Tiong Lai, in the dialogue with the relevant ministry, the Works Ministry, to state MCA's stand on this issue. And ultimately, and we are going to further bring this matter up for discussion and ventilation in the cabinet level.